Practice set 6. For each problem, use the sine ratio to determine the size of angle A. Use the procedure shown in examples 23 and 24. Write your answers to the nearest tenth of a degree. The first step is to identify where the reference angle is. And the reference angle is the angle that we're trying to identify the size of, angle A. Think of this as our home base or anchor to help us label the sides. That will be the next step that we need to do in solving this problem. Always starting with the hypotenuse, which is the longest side opposite the right angle in the triangle. With A, our reference angle, our anchor. The next one we will identify is the opposite side. And last, the third side of the triangle is the adjacent side. We're using the sine ratio here, and by definition, the sine of an angle is defined by the opposite side length over the length of the hypotenuse. There's 3 places for variables. To solve this ratio, we need to know 2 of the 3. In this ratio, we don't know the angle size, but we do know the length of the opposite side is 13.5. We also know the length of the hypotenuse, 47.2. Next step is to simplify this fraction. We're going to divide the numerator by the denominator so that we have a decimal equivalency. And when we do that division, we end up with 0.2860. You might want to leave that in your calculator for the next step. Next, we have to use arc sine to solve this equation for the angle. So we will take the arc sine, which is the undoing of the sine function, on both sides of our equation so that we maintain equality. The arc sine of a sine gives us the angle A, and the arc sine of 0.2860 using your calculator. Generally, the steps are using the second or inverse function of your sine key to activate the arc sine, which sometimes is displayed this way. And when we do that, rounding that value from the calculation to the nearest tenth, we find that angle A has a measure of 16.6 degrees. Problem number 2 is asking us to find the measure of angle A. A will act as our home base or our anchor. First thing, we want to identify the lengths of the sides, and the longest side is the first one that we identify. It's the side opposite the right angle, and that would be the hypotenuse. Given angle A is our reference, and the angle we're trying to determine the measure of, the side opposite it will be the length we will use for opposite, and the third side, unnamed at this point, has a name. It's the adjacent side. Using the sine ratio then, the sine of an angle is defined as the ratio of the opposite side length to the hypotenuse length. Plugging in what we know, we identified that the opposite side from angle A has a length of 3.3. The hypotenuse, the longest side in the triangle, is 4.7. Next, we will start by dividing the numerator by the denominator to simplify that fraction into a decimal equivalency. That gives us a value of 0.7021. And the last step is we're going to use arc sine on both sides to undo the sine function. And using your calculator, if you have a traditional calculator, you'll start with 0.7021, or perhaps you've left that result from the division in the previous step, and activating your shift or second key and sine key to get to the arcsine button. And the result turns out to give us a measurement of 44.6 degrees when we round that to the nearest tenth. If you have a direct algebraic logic calculator, then you would start with the second or inverse key, then the sine key, and typing in this decimal value to get our answer of 44.6 degrees.